Hey folks, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to continue the project of building this stem wall to support our porches and sidewalks. First thing you're going to see me doing is notching this block with a skill saw and then knocking out the pieces so that I can use this to make the bond beam. That notch gives a place for the rebar to lay inside the block and expands the size of the beam concrete inside that block. Well, I have discovered a few things in the 3 days now I've been attempting to do this project. First, I'm still not a block mason. Second, I was trying to use this mortar too dry. And part of the reason that I was trying to use it too dry is my experience with doing any kind of masonry up to this point has been, one, self-taught, but two, using native stone. And what we found using the native stone is if we got the mortar too wet, it wouldn't stay in place. And it seems that because this block is so porous and dry, that it absorbs the moisture out of the mortar a lot faster than the stone did that we were working with. And so you're able to get this in place and have it stay with a lot wetter mortar, and it works a lot easier and a lot faster. But I'm still not a mason. But most of this is going to end up buried anyway, so I guess it'll be all right. And the biggest pain is setting these dang corners, because you want them to be accurate, and because that's where your string line runs to line everything else up. And I'm doing this incorrectly, because normally you would stack up however many courses in your corner. But what I'm trying to do, and I've said it before, is get the first course on this dang footing so I can stop having to clean it off, because every time it rains, it gets covered with mud. And you got to take the mud off and get it clean, or the mortar isn't going to stick to it. So I'm, trying to just get the first course done, and then I had to order more rebar. Once rebar comes in and I can get it in this first course of block, then I'll come back and finish laying up these corners and go on up with the rest of it. And my trowel skills are still well, kind of like having a kindergartner do your block work. So I'm sure that there's going to be a block mason look at this and spit their beer everywhere. And just like any trade, there's tricks to it that improve your efficiency and your accuracy. And I don't know what those are. I do know that I prefer working with steel, or even wood, because this is pretty dang physically demanding. And I've also rediscovered that these fingers end up being used as much as a trowel. And I've seen masons lay out a whole big long string of this stuff, and what I have found is that I spend more time stepping on it and having to redo it if I do that. And I'm still not quite sure what 16 inches looks like apparently. Good. All right, so I got 12 inches here on the end. To make room for the mortar joints, I need to cut that at 11 1/4. That takes 3/8 roughly off of each end. Probably gonna go ahead and cut it at 11 just to give me a little fudge room. To do an inside corner to an outside corner with the string line, all I did was took one of these staples we got hundreds of from doing the Legacy Block, put a string around it with an eye right up in the corner, and then I can get that on the corner of the block and it'll lock into place, and then I can use a regular string block at the other end on the outside corner to hold everything. What I'm doing here is tooling the joints on these block after this mortar is set up for a little bit. The tooling makes it look better because I don't know which of this block is going to end up being exposed until we can get the rock on it and which is not. So I'm going ahead and just tooling most of it. But the primary reason that you're tooling the joints is it seals the mortar to the block better by compressing it into the joint, and it makes it a little more waterproof. If this was going to be completely exposed, that would be a bigger concern, but since it's more than likely on this section especially going to be underground because we're going to bring the yard up to it and then it's backfilled on the backside, the moisture penetration is not as big a concern. To continue this block on around the house at the back, past this step, I'm going to have to cut the next course of block down in height. And the reason I'm having to do this is twofold. One, as I stated earlier, I did these footings incorrectly. I didn't allow enough depth to use full blocks. My original plan, because of the final grade that we needed on the outside edge of the porch across the front, was to do this front section in half blocks, and then I would have the right final grade. Because I did this step incorrectly, I've got to cut one of the courses of block to 6 inches all the way around. And because I put these short blocks on the bottom in the front, because I knew that was going to be buried and I didn't want to see the partial block at the top, I've got to do that in the bottom section on this back. I went ahead and put full blocks in around the back because I didn't know exactly what that step was going to work out to be, and because I'd been having problems with the math anyway, I just figured get the first course in, stop having a problem with the mud, and then I'll make my adjustment off of that. So what I've got to do is cut these down the way it looks now to about 6 inches. So I'm going to cut one and test it, and that should give us about a 1/2 inch bedding joint between this course of block and this course that I'm going to have to cut to get everything to line up. And by doing it that way, it'll let me then continue this on around at the same course height. Here you're going to see me using a diamond cup wheel on a grinder to take down the unevenness from cutting this block. It took me a little bit to figure out how best to hold that saw to get the most square cuts when I was cutting these on the ground. So that diamond cup wheel helps take that peak out of the middle of it to give it a level surface when I'm setting it on the wall. Alright, looks like that's gonna work. Okay, I'm finally done cutting that block. I didn't figure you'd want to watch me do that 100 times. So we're gonna walk the camera around and just show you how many block I cut today.
Do you want me to push them down like dominoes?
No, because they'll probably break. All right, folks, I finally figured out how to make this mixer usable for me. I just blocked it up and tied it down to a pallet so I can raise it up with the tractor and get it high enough to dump into the wheelbarrow. It's still kind of a pain because, you know, keeping it clean and all of that, because since I work so slow, the concrete has a tendency to set up, so I've got to rinse it out every time I use it. But what I found is I'm getting a lot more consistent mortar. It's giving me a better product to work with. So I'm gonna get a batch made up and then go back to laying block. Of course, I about figured out how much mortar it takes to do these head joints on a full-size block, and these are 6 inches instead of 8 or 7 5/8. So I'm having to figure it out again with these. All right, folks, continuing the trend of ignorance in this block laying project. Um, I have found that there's some unevenness in this footing, as I stated earlier, and I didn't know how to correct that problem in the block laying process until I finally asked the internet the correct question. And what I should have done is gotten the corner blocks set to elevation and then taken block and laid it on the footing upside down, struck a line so that I had a straight line that would give me a level surface on the top of the block. So it would give me a cut line basically. So you put it on upside down, run your chalk line between your two fixed points that are at the correct elevation, strike a line, then cut your block, then turn the block right side up, and it will take out that variance in your footing. So now that I have found a compounding problem that I don't want to continue all the way to the top of this wall, I'm gonna cut this block on the top, and then I should have a level surface to lay the rest of the block and shouldn't have this compounding problem continuing through the project. Okay, hopefully now this has corrected my original block laying mistake, the footing being wonky aside. You know, looking down this, it looks a lot better than it did. So hopefully this will go better going on up with the next couple of courses. Definitely would have been easier to do this correctly from the beginning. Of course, I learned something. Won't make that mistake again. I'm sure there will be plenty of other opportunities to screw something up and learn from it though. Now that I believe I have remedied my mistake in the back, I'm gonna start laying up the rest of these corners, and I'm gonna use the laser to pull an elevation off of these blocks and transfer that to the back. I said earlier that if you think you got enough water in this mortar, add a little more. It seems like using the mixer that the best consistency I'm getting for workability and supporting the block and adhesion is at about 6.5 to 7 quarts of water to an 80-pound bag of type S mortar. You know, you're gonna have to test it for yourself and see what works best, but that seems to be what's working the best for me with this Quikrete premix stuff. And it, with the sun getting on it, and when it's hot out, it tends to go off a little quick. So that's why I've, you know, got that spray bottle that you see me adding water to it to temper it and keep it workable. When I started this, I was definitely using this mortar too dry. It was very hard to get it bedded in and get it to stick. Something else I figured out that I did stupidly. You'll see me making short sections of block to fill, which you're gonna have unless your wall layout is exactly on standard size block measurements. But what I did, kind of chasing the shade, and based on, you know, just kind of where I started working these sections of block from both ends. And what that ended up causing is multiple piece blocks. Whereas if I had gone from one end to the other, I would have had a lot more standard joints and only one staggered cut worked up through the wall instead of two. Something else I learned, I set these pallets of block a little too close to the work area, trying to save myself steps, and it's made it a little cramped, especially with this footing being down below ground level. That's what I'm talking about, the block being too close to the wall. So I had to move that wheelbarrow back out of the way, whereas if the block was a little further out, I could just go alongside the wall. The spot I skipped there is one of those places I was talking about where there's a cut, and I skipped it so that my bond stays on pattern in the center of the block. Now, I'm not overly concerned about the top of this being perfectly level because I'm gonna have to cut this down anyway, but it's gonna have 3.5 inches of concrete on top of it. So, you know, it's not like it's finished grade that I'm building a house on top of. It's just here to hold up the sidewalk and the porch on the rest of the house. So I'm not, you know, expending a lot of energy trying to get this perfectly level. Alright, except for striking these joints, that's got this part of this project complete. Next thing I got to do is get my elevation lines on here and see where I'm at for the outside edge of the porch and having fall away from the house. Get the rebar and the bond beam cut into the top, and then backfill these, or fill these rather, with concrete, and then backfill and rebar and form and pour the porch. So thanks for hanging out with me, and y'all have a good day.